RM agro as well, or are they just domain experts in the field of agriculture itself?
Yeah, usually domain experts are not using RM agro, but so in this project also software developing companies are involved, and I would say they are the main beneficiaries of the model.
That's the new ontological representation of that RM agro.
Yes, so they then have to convert somehow or align their systems to a implementation model of the reference model.
And what is in it for them?
That's a good question, I think. Obviously they have a business model with decision support systems that they provide, but I think the ecosystem is growing or evolving and dynamic, and new concepts, but also new technologies, makes them need to adapt, but also to make the service available with the relevant data. So I think these data technologies, to at least explore these new data technologies for their future business model, makes it interesting for them.
I have a question. So of course, agricultural research is going on all over the globe under different circumstances, high tech or low tech. I'm familiar with CIGAR, CGI, are doing work in Africa and other places, and their promotion of ontologies in that space, including a crop ontology of some kind or farm. So obviously the socio-technical question of how much you're taking on in your project. Are you starting out with Dutch farming practices and technique and standards, and then moving out from there, or is it legislative focused in terms of reporting, or what were the ambitions there to figure out your global undertaking with respect to interoperability in agriculture?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think in each project the challenge is indeed the budget and limitations you have in contrast with the ambitions. To repeat the question, so if I understood correctly, how do we see our ambitions in terms of international alignment with also, for example, CGIAR, crop ontology? So the challenge is within the project that we are limited to a certain extent of budget, but also to a certain extent of stakeholders with their expected benefits. What we do now is indeed to take the reference model agro, which has an international view, as a starting point, and the scope of the internationalization is at this moment only on the European context. So the agriculture information model, which I mentioned in the ISO, although the ISO is international more. But I think it's a good question, which we also need to take into account when formulating or documenting our design patterns. And that's what we did not yet did deliberately, at least. So I hope it gives an answer to your question.
Okay, thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Giorgio. Next, I would like to introduce Giorgio. He's He's a PhD student in philosophy at the Department of Human Mind and Its Explanations, Language, Brain, and Reasoning at the University of Milan. And also doctoral fellow at the International Center for Food, Ontology, Operability, Data, and Semantics, or ICBO. His current areas of interest are ontology and food system sustainability, and his PhD project aims to establish strategies to support food system stakeholders in developing ontology resources to deal with the sustainability of systems they belong to. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Hi everyone. So first of all, so let me show you what I do involved here. So myself, Daoud Urdu, my two supervisors, and I will media and So we're going to talk about sustainability now, especially on food systems. Why we need to talk about food system sustainability? Because currently the world is facing a lot of issues, sustainability issues such as climate change, biodiversity loss, malnutrition, health concerns, and so on. And food, without creating life around the world, food systems are playing a fundamental role in driving all these issues. And so we need transformative action for moving toward a more sustainable food system. But first, we need to understand what we mean when we say sustainable. In fact, sustainability is challenging. So if our main definition of what sustainability is, basically there are many different perspectives and meaning associated with this term. So consequently, we have also many different approaches, practices, and methods of sustainability. So what we need first, before shaping any possible transformative action, is a straightforward account of food system sustainability. And ontology can help there, share languages that can account for the different meanings, different relationships, implications, and so on. However, today ontology are built relying on implicitly or explicitly on frameworks that just reflect the perspective. So maybe you can refer to some coded frameworks such as SDGs or maybe some more implicit personal view on sustainability. Building ontology in this way is not sufficient when we want to talk about sustainability, because we need to deal with the variety of perspectives existing in order to create a consistent stable account of sustainability. So what we need is to build ontology on something that we call a framework. So I'm going to explain what I mean by framework. So the term framework is used widely in the literature. Sometimes you can find some adjectives such as conceptual, sometimes theoretical, and so on. So probably when we have a phenomenon interest, a framework is a descriptive structure that outlines systematically details of a phenomenon. So it provides an account of a phenomenon that is positioned according to the perspective. So for instance, I can get sustainability from the food security side, or maybe I can focus more on health and so on. Instead, a meta framework is a foundational descriptive structure. So it provides and defines the tenets of that phenomenon. So by tenets, we mean the grounding elements that each framework needs to consider to have a consistent account of, in our case, consistent sustainability of that phenomenon. So we want to be a perspective impartial in the sense that we want to be a direct platform for accommodating different perspectives in order to ensure integrating frameworks and perspectives. So what we propose is to build a meta framework for consistent sustainability that could be a dialogue platform for stakeholders with the goal to design and integrate the ontology about food system sustainability. The two major elements of the system, our tenets are pillars, basically thematic grounding element, and the others are the stock of essential relations. So the relations that refer to entities all this and food system sustainability. We're developing this meta framework literature exploration, about ontology, system, and sustainability. And what I'm going to show you in a second are the foundation of this meta framework. We consider it implementable in time, so we can curate and debate it as sustainability can move forward in time, so we need also to update. So pillars, we have 3 pillars. The first one are the perspective of food system stakeholders. So we have many stakeholders in food systems by matter, both humans and non-humans. They have perspective on sustainability and based systems. So this is the first pillar that we need to keep in mind. The second one are the headway food system and complex system. So when we deal with food system, we need to deal with complexity and the complex change behavior of this systems. The third pillar is about transformation. So generally, the church about food system sustainability, the idea is to move forward from a sustainable state of the system to something more sustainable. However, as complex systems are changing, we need to consider the sense of change. So features such as system resilience, stability, and well-being should generally point out of this transformation to move towards the change. This day, to decide about relations, we identify 2 major stocks of relations: domain neutral and domain proper. So domain neutrals are relations that apply to any phenomenon features. So for example, we can have an object as another part. Instead, a domain proper is a relation more specifically in our case to sustainability, but that can apply also to other domains, but not to any possible domains, just domain one. However, depending on your ontological commitment, view of reality, you can have different subsets of these 2 domain stocks. So if we follow the global foundry realism, that see reality existing in some way, in a way that could be understood from investigation, and we actually kind of entity or kind of entities, particulars, all the instances, our let's say, in universal that are the elements that exist in reality that make reason for the scenarios that exist in the moment that exist in particulars. So basically, we can have 3 subsets of relations for both domain neutral and domain proper that are relations between particulars, between individuals and universal, and between universals. Very good thing in the table. The good side are what in our family are considered domain neutral relations. The relation between particulars and universal are considered primitive, as universal exist in particulars. So these relations are considered primitive. We can just elucidate them. We cannot give a definition. So you can see here the different subset, and then for which consider that the universal relations are defined based on the particulars, and universal participant relations, and you can see very different subset. So from the proper side, we didn't find any specific group of relations for sustainability. So we define some traits for identifying them, such as configuration dynamic, systems, scanning, components, context, the value of system, and actions based on pillars. We identify some already existing relationships in the world, and you can see some examples. So given these 2 elements of the meta framework, then we create an atlas. So we want to help people in building ontologies. So in this series of graphical non-page-based illustration, you can find terms and relations compliant with the overfund perspective. We have 4 charts. The first one is the main one. You can see a fragment in the upside. So we align our 4 terms about system sustainability with 2 ontologies. The first one is basically from an ontology, with data level ontology with the fund, and the sustainability core ontology, but it's an level ontology of sustainability that we built in another report. From this chart, you can see another link, so you can click on that and move to the other chart. Each one for each pillar where we add additional terms and relationships. But in the auxiliary chart, you can find also links to external literature where you can read papers, for instance, about the system if you click on the system. We built a using Semantic tool that is a software for building graphical illustration where you can link different resources. So what's next? We have a framework, so we want to create guidelines to use it for building ontologies. So we didn't find any methodology provide the usage of a framework, not a framework. But we don't want to create something new, completely new. So we base on, we're going to create our methodology based on existing methodologies such as Ontology, Ontology development 101, and so on. And of course, we want to create a use case ontology that is going to be about meat. So the idea is to represent a sustainable meat system. Why? Because meat systems are the first primary driver of the issues that I told you before, among system where the meat. So we want to focus on meat in a sense, in a broad sense, so products and also by products, starting with cow as use case and starting example. So here we can see just an outline of the methodology. So the idea is to set the project, like defining all the stakeholders, then to have a participatory design, try to engage with stakeholders, build the ontology, validate it, and finally, of course, maintain it. So the idea is to curate and so on. In conclusion, we built a meta framework, we have an atlas, and we define pillars and stocks, and we are designing a methodology to use this meta framework for the ontology, and we are setting the basis for developing a sustainable meat system ontology. Some people are excited, and here are some people that I want to thank. Very Smith and John Beveridge, professor at the University of Buffalo, and a lot of students from both the University of Milan and the University of Buffalo. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from?
Thank you for the presentation. In a few slides previously, and you might have just said it about the time, there was, it said there were 3 lines that were already terms, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah. What are the obsolete terms for?
I'm sorry, what?
What are the 3 obsolete terms for?
Yeah. So basically, starting from the main chart, you can click on the link. You can basically identify 3 main terms that are consistent stakeholders perspective, and consistent transformation. You can click on the chart, and you have a link that points to the other 3 charts. Each one of the 3 auxiliary charts provide additional term more specific for each pillar. So basically, you have a chart more specific for perspective, one more specific for complexity, and one for transformation. So the idea is that this kind of chart is just because otherwise it's going to be a super messy big chart that is going to be impossible to do. So for now, we're going to have something like that. Then we would like to move it to some better environment for visualizing together and so on. Yeah.
The question that I still on this slide, in your pillar 3, you are quite within food security and health, and yet currently the food system is primarily an economic driver. Why aren't you integrating economics with the food security and health?
Yeah, so
question, and then I have another one.
Okay, so I consider the economical driver in. So these pillars are not separate, so you need to consider them together. And the economic driver you can have, for instance, on the complexity side, but also in the transformation one. These aspects that I point out here are those that in the literature that I read are the primary goal, let's say, that transformation want to meet. So basically, when you want to move from a sustainable system to a sustainable one, the idea is to improve well-being. Well-being in food systems primarily related to food security and health. And generally, we point out aspects such as system resilience and stability, in a sense like we want to improve the resilience in order to have a better well-being. But so, for instance, economic driver, also social, cultural one, are transversal, let's say, among these aspects, these three pillars. Did I answer you or?
Okay, but yet in complex system, you need to look at your starting condition, and your condition is primarily data. That's why it's important to versionalize it. My other question is that food presents a unique challenge of being between agriculture, farm level, like the previous one, industry, community life, and human behavior. How will you, I think the idea of the meta framework is excellent. how will you move to concretely build this integration?
So I try to avoid organizing like dimension because otherwise it becomes very difficult to define boundaries and like what is a cultural dimension or social one, so it becomes difficult to distinguish one from the other one. So I try to stay in a more general, let's say, side, so speaking more about complexity. But I think we need to learn even more. So when you're going to use these meta frameworks, it is like just a basis from which to start. And then, of course, we need to be on more like economic asset and aspect for social development and so on. So we want to be like a guiding line, let's say. For this reason, we are also trying to define some methodologies because otherwise it's going to be too much abstract. So we want to make it usable. So this is like the BI framework. So then you can have different frameworks based on that. And you can integrate it. So. Yeah.
How would this, I have difficulty in making the connection between previous talk and your talk, so how would you make that connection? What do the people in marketing need to change in order to fit in with your meta framework, or do you need to change your meta framework in order to fit them in?
Yeah, so our idea is to use it like a basis. So for instance, they want to interact with some other stakeholders or build something similar, but from a different perspective, so they can base on it together and try to accommodate various perspectives and use, like, for instance, functional aspect of complexity and perspective and so on, and try them to merge them together. This is an idea to use it. You're going to use this meta framework as a basis for building your own meta frameworks in a way that then could be integratable, interoperable with others one because they're sharing the same basis.
And so that means that you need to involve, like you said, the human stakeholders from all these different domains.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Yeah, it's going to be super easy. So the idea is to do in a way that you can continue to create and implement both the meta framework and the resources. You want to start with someone, so the idea is to create an ontology. So we're going to start with some people, and then the idea is to find additional people working on need, for instance, in this case, and try to engage with them for improving our resources and other ones in a way that can be integratable. Yeah.
I'm going to give segues to that. If you look back to that slide that had the different levels, in that one, yeah. Yeah, so I'm seeing sort of in the background there, food system being subclass of complex system. And I've seen his attribute of self-organizing, emergent, separate causation, granularity. So these terms all have definitions. And I think this becomes a scorecard with respect to claims about a universal idea of way food systems or complex systems are defined, such that if you are looking at your own sustainability initiative, then you can see which parts you're not addressing or don't have as part of your program. You can sort of situate yourself in your effort in this. Is that kind of framework is letting you do?
Yeah, because for instance, in this chart, you don't find definitions because the majority of the stuff you can have different definition of that. So instead we link additional literature, so you can go to the people that are studying the stuff and then create your definition based on that or reuse it existing definition and so on. So you want to be like a guiding tool for now, just starting point. I mean, it is something very used. We want to enable people for improving it. So.
Did you find it fairly easy to get a definition for complex system?
So, I have a definition in my previous work, but it's based on the paper that I read. But depending, so basically complexity is one of the topics. It's a very controversial topic. You can address it in mathematics, in physics, in physics. So depending on the so we don't have for now a shared definition of complexity or complex system. So you have many different definitions. So you need in some way try to there are similar in some way, but not exactly the same. So you need to build it back. It's the same problem as well. Yeah. So they need my proposal was to let's check what we have and try to figure out how we go.
I have another question if I may, please. about your sustainable meat ontology. Why would you need an ontology specifically for that? If there's a food ontology, and if there's a sustainability ontology, wouldn't it be just connecting those two to find sustainable needs, and wouldn't that be more or less?
Yeah, so our idea is so that the green, the dark side, sorry, the dark green terms here are from my ontology about sustainability, sustainability ontology. So what we want to build is an extension for meat systems, basically. The idea is we don't have for now a specific ontology for meat system, sustainability. So I checked the literature, and we have different ontologies for meat, or maybe meat system, or something else like cheese, milk, and so on. But the majority of them are not publicly available. So we also use additional program. So the idea is to, of course, reuse already existing ontology. For instance, there are 4 or 5 ontology built in France for like livestock trails. So more on the animal side, and for instance, all disease for cows and so on. So the idea is to pick something from there, something from food, using our ontology and try to create something specifically for the system. In order to help people that are working on meat system project, and we need some ontology for that project. Yes.
In fact, my question built on that one, and the question is also to you, Daniel, because in some ways a matter of granularity. If you have food sustainability, food on is now quite generic in terms of being used, and you have many components of your pillar and so on that are there. What are you currently working in synergy with food and food on in the various granularity that can bring you the need and so on? Because if we don't start connecting the ontology, we won't connect anything in the web. I don't know, Daniel.
Unfortunately, my hearing is not that great. I didn't really catch your question, so maybe over to you.
So yeah, the idea is so ask if we can basically work together and put it on and so on. So the idea is to so now my work focuses on the overall foundry side. So this is one of the political perspectives existing for now. Works for different domains. So the idea is for now is to align web. So my ontology is aligned with IFOW. IFOW is the top level ontology, also for Fulham. So we already have a common way for visualize. And yeah, of course, I'm gonna take terms from Fulham that well. It was maybe
I guess the question I ask myself is complex systems. They're complex because there's so many processes going on. I love to analyze everything from a process modeling perspective. And the interaction of those processes are what yield the future out of the past. And Food On so far has been just focused on material processing. What do you do in the kitchen? We're starting to help maybe agro, or they're starting to help us work out what the processes are back to the farm. But that's just one kind of food processing. There's all sorts of other issues, processes happening around nature, biodiversity, ocean as resource, ocean as ecosystem. So I would hope that Food On could help contribute some terms, but people basically have to come to us and ask for terms to support their effort. We won't be the core focus of any of that process model. We'll just try to support research efforts that are.
Oh, thank you. And Ida is going to introduce the next speaker.
All right, so our next speaker is again from Modernizing. It's Roel Veraart. And Roel is a philosopher, and he defended his PhD last year about the first philosophy of the bio-based economy. He's very interested in the issues involving the relationship between humans and nature, agriculture, and animals. And I guess he's going to talk about all of that. So, Roel, please take a stand.
Thank you. Yeah. Maybe I could just put it in my little pocket here. Does that work? A bit too far away, I guess. Good. Thank you. That's great. So indeed, I'm here with Daoud and Joep. They took me along from Wageningen as they are working, like many of you here, on the serious technical aspects of ontologies, semantics, and how to integrate those in the field of food. And I am also attached into one of these Wageningen projects as a philosopher, indeed. And I'm trying to make sense of some fundamental notions at stake in working with food, agriculture, systems, ontology, data, economy. Everything okay with my device?
Sorry, do you have the microphone on? Oh, it's in your pocket.
It's too far away?
No, it's
I
fine.
was just sitting.
I didn't see it. I saw it. Okay, sorry.
I'm especially made. So I will just try to combine some of these notions here today, because in philosophy, as a lot of you probably know, we've seen a couple of philosophers already. Ontology is also a big word, and in data. So I am searching for a link there, and ultimately I am researching this around the notion of paradigm, which is what I will end with. So the project that I'm involved in is called Data for Food. 70 people, 9 case studies throughout Europe, investigating grain, pigs, almonds, wine, tourism, sewer flows. And the idea is that there is not yet a data economy in Europe. There is lots of data, it is being sold, distributed, consumed, etc. But how? And should there be new legislation? Is it all ethical? What will it lead to? What does the future look like? Etc. So in 4 years, we are going to try and provide some pathways, some planned courses of action, some critical remarks, etc. So to start with how I, as a philosopher, understand what an ontology in data means, and I will look for a similarity with the philosophical understanding of ontology here, is that if you have raw data, numbers coming from sensors, measuring agricultural fields, for example, irrigation, water. If you just have a big data set filled with numbers, they don't mean anything yet. You need to structure them, to clean the data, put them in sets, categories, to define what they are for you to be able to do something with that. In food systems, we saw a lot of examples of this already. We need to know what is that kind of tomato, where does it come from, how many other categories are there, how can it be sold. And this is, as we have seen many examples, very extensive effort. What does even something as age mean? When does it spoil? Food is constantly evolving. GMOs, we're developing new kinds. They are connected to different cultures, different regions, different practices, different eating habits, and to try and quantify all of that information into a logical system with semantics that can be used globally, understood by anybody, is of course a very difficult process. And so in data for food, what this comes down to is this is just gibberish, it's just to look like a picture. The case studies are developing data spaces. This is the big word now. If you want economic structures of data ontology revolving around food, then the idea is that we need to build a data space. So if you have grain distribution in Finland is one of the case studies. How can we take that information together, combine it, make it more sustainable, take into consideration governmental structures, the different stakeholders, animal well-being, farmers, economics, and put them all in one data set that combines this information and then does something with it in the economy in favorably a sustainable, equitable manner. And so those people in the 98 are hard at work building these different data spaces, and the idea is that if you have such a successful data space, you can extrapolate it, reuse it to then transform it to, say, European level, go bigger, reuse it, and eventually quantify everything so that we have a smooth, interoperable data economy in which everybody knows what is what and where the value is at. Now, I want to say what ontology means in philosophy. Not a very simple question in a minute, but there is a big similarity with what we understand to be an ontology in data science. I think that's what I think. So, yeah, one more note on that, that this project is super interdisciplinary. We need economists, legal people, there's natural scientists, data scientists, and even one philosopher. So it is very hard to all talk the same language. In a way, we are, as a science, also looking at interoperability in the sense of how to talk to each other. We need semantics, concepts, etc. So this is, for me, an effort to try and make some sense of what the data people are talking about. And now I will give an example of what ontology means in philosophy. Because in at least the Western tradition, the pre-Socrates were the first people that thought, okay, I'm in a world, I exist, the world exists, but what does it mean for the world to exist? So you have anthropology, what is the human? You have epistemology, what is knowledge? And then ontology asks, what is being? There is just being in general, but what are the primal categories of this being? And the first examples include Mr. Thales, and he said, well, it seems like this is a thing, but really it is made out of water. So, and everything is all water, but it just looks like different stuff. So the first category of being is water. And another guy said, no, everything is fire. And many philosophers have made many ontologies. Another example is Mr. Spinoza, a couple of years later, and he said, everything that exists is God, or God is everything that exists, primal category, everything that is in the world. But God exists in two different attributes, namely body and mind. They are the same thing, two categories. The being is one, God. And in the 20th century, it got a little bit more complex. I don't think I have time for that. I will try to incorporate it a bit in what I'm saying about data now. Because data seems to me as a philosopher as a kind of a new category of being in the world. A ghost of numbers following the physical world as we are quantifying all these systems, turning into numbers, the food systems. There is a digital copy, almost as a mind of the stuff behind it. But then it's not separated from the physical world, but they are very closely intertwined, related. So there is an extra digital layer, but this digital layer also defines how we exist in the world, how we think about things, how we understand food practices, cultural habits, livelihoods, farming of the future, money, systems. It's connected to everything. So what is data? This is for for me, a very fundamental question in the project. The meaning, semantical, of a tomato has changed. It is no longer the same thing that that our ancestors encountered. And if you define things, then you also say something about how they should be. So they have a big normative aspect. This data economy will have consequences for farmers, consumers, distributors, sustainability, in the future, amazing consequences. So what is at stake in defining these data systems, creating them, is in fact a whole ethical realm of questions. Just to draw from a couple examples: environmental impact, ownership, autonomy, control, governmental relations, responsibilities, animal health and well-being, water distribution, biodiversity, future generations, consumer health, the market, impact of digitalization, power relation, competitiveness, individual actors, societal goals, etc., etc. The list goes on. So in Wageningen, we like to do the ELSA lab, which looks at ethical, legal, and social aspects of a technology. And this is the famous Golden Bridge dilemma that we use to think about that stuff. We are right now somewhere in the middle. Some ontologies are being applied already. Some may even have an impact. A lot of it is still being researched. And as it is being created, there is this difficulty that we do not know where it will go yet. We do not know how it will end up in the future. But by the time it has been implemented and broadly used, it is too late to go back. Think about social media, for example. Hey, great idea, connect. And now we see that there are a lot of problems, but we cannot just go back and revise the original design because it has been installed in physical infrastructures, cultural habits, etc. So this is the difficulty of looking at something such as a data economy as a researcher, because I ate this morning and I also use my laptop and my phone. So I'm not only looking at food systems and data, but I'm also being made by those things. They influence me, what I am as a being. I cannot exist as a non-eating, non-digitalized entity in the world. So we're caught in a kind of a circle, a trap in which the investigating subject is itself being formed by the very subject that it is investigating. This is pretty much the same dilemma as in the Golden Bridge dilemma, trapped in this methodological cycle. Now, to close off, a lot of papers talk about the paradigm shift of digitalization. There are wars going on. We saw a COVID crisis. There is a bigger population. People need to eat, but it also has to be sustainable. How are we going to produce it? How are we going to do it? And the big answer is digitalization, make it smart sensors, AI. We can produce more while using less. And then the digital realm is understood as a new paradigm. But the digital paradigm, digital technologies as we saw, for example, this AI created picture, use old data that are drawn from the world in a specific calculative manner of thinking. So, and that is not a new, that is not a paradigmatic shift, that is an old economic tendency. Calculate stuff, list it, and then do something with it. And the data that are being used are always also from the past being projected into the future. So while we are stepping into a new world, we are doing so also by old means that can possibly perpetuate economical tendencies that do not fit a sustainable future per se. This is another weird conceptual split that we are in. And I have one final example. talking about semantics, if you say that data is a resource, the new oil, then this is true. And of course, it's very valuable in a lot of practices. But at the same time, data is not tangible, it's non-depletable, it's non-rivalry, it can be used by many people at once. There are countless differences between what we traditionally understand as a resource economically and the nature of this new digital being in the world of data. So, semantically, that is another shift. A resource is no longer what we understand to be a resource. We use the same word, but the meaning has shifted. This to just give you some examples about what it is like to be a philosopher in a data food project. Thank you so much for your attention.
Questions?
I like the idea of, and I think like ontologies are nice tools to critically reflect on environment. You're writing stuff, you're assessing stuff, but you're doing it at a level of complexity quite high. That's also what I studied. Trying to do definitions, put together, we learn to go together and try to understand a common shared terminology and blah, blah, blah. So I think it's there's potential to also do not stuff and I've been thinking about it for a while. I had no idea how to actually implement it. What is your plan? Or the ways you think that maybe ontologies new in practice and start to implement all of that in a way which is consistent with ontology practice.
Yeah, indeed, first of all, they are just major questions which have to be acknowledged, at least the complexity of what is at stake. And then second, I have these analogies with the data ontology, and I am not sure myself how to really draw that bridge between philosophy and data science. I feel like there is something there, and my approach for now is I will just look at ontologies from the 20th century and then try to work out what they would say data is, asking that question about being. Right now, my plan is to work with Jacques Derrida. He understands science, symbols, language as the prime category of what is being. And I will try to draw his insights to obtain a better understanding, or at least a more accurate one, of what kind of a being data is nowadays. And then we're writing papers on economic principles, concepts such as paradigm. What do you mean by it? But sadly, really an integrated approach of using data science perspective and a philosophy perspective on what is ontology. I'm hoping to find allies and people that can help me build that. Yeah, we can talk later.
So I sometimes wonder, this isn't just for your talk, this is something more general. I sometimes think that people, when we're modeling data, sort of misrepresenting it as like special, additional, weird thing in the ether that's out right there. We can also, it seems like you can describe data systems either both through more concrete things, physical things, disposition with the computer, how just describe how it's disposed to respond to certain things. Do you feel like there's this is like a genuine question, or should we be going down this route to also say that? making out as being a spooky additional thing of functionality versus talking about it as physical.
Yeah, that's very good. You asked, would you say that this is a genuine, just missed that.
Oh, sorry. Do you feel like this is a, I guess my question is, do you feel like we should continue to go in this direction of being as this for people, or do you feel that it's that pull back?
Yeah, it's completely true that data is not a kind of spirit out there. Data centers, lithium, cobalt, mining, fabricating, cables under the water, and they are integrated in everyday practices of our lives. So it is completely true that it is not a mind-body distinction at all. In fact, what is to me most interesting is the way the relation, and in philosophy we would say that the ontic stuff, so the beings in the world, are influencing the world on an ontological level, which is quite unprecedented in philosophy, and it is new. So instead that we are making the tools survive generations, pass on specific knowledge and behaviors, and thus influence every new being that is born into the world, changing its ontological status. So in fact, they are completely intertwined. It's very right.
I have a more practical question, if I may, about data for food. You said it's very difficult to have all those people speak the same language. How do you achieve that?
Yeah, we went to Mallorca 2 weeks ago.
Just going to Mallorca doesn't make you speak so
with everybody from Europe. We're not always together in the same room. And then everybody does a presentation. Everybody asks their questions. We put stuff online in the shared documents. We make a plan in different work packages. And we try to touch upon the same topics. Yeah. What else can you do than listening, showing interest, trying to work on similar questions? If you did a PhD in your field, then you're in a very specific angle. It's hard to get out of it. And the questions are so big that you need a lot of expertise to answer certain things.
So do you feel that you can truly communicate with the data scientists and with the mathematicians and with the economists?
Not as they do amongst each other. That is, interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity is this new movement in science. We are still trying to work out how it should work. I think, I see for philosophy a task to try and combine stuff. If it can do something empirical today, then it should maybe be trying to help search for common vocabulary. Maybe it is difficult. Absolutely.
I think in view of time we should leave it with that. Is that okay with you, Kenny? And then I would like to ask our next speaker to come forward. That's Joep Tummers. He's also from Wageningen. And he has a PhD in health informatics, and he works on bridging the gap between the agricultural sector and technology, and he focuses on challenging the interoperability challenges. So you, go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. We first put on the microphone. Okay. So welcome everybody. Today I want to take you along the journey of the COMFOCUS project. It is a European Horizon 2020 project on the community of food consumer science. I will dive into the project a little bit more later and explain what the project is all about. So my name indeed is Joep Tummers. I'm from Wageningen Economic Research. I work on this presentation with my colleague Roel and 3 other colleagues from the Joseph Stecker Institute of Slovenia. So what I want to talk with you today, we'll first dive a little bit into the project, give you a little bit of background. Why are we doing this? Why do we need an ontology in this project? How are we developing it, etc. Next, I will dive with you into the COMFOCUS ontology. I will explain to you what are the basics, what are the design principles we use, and how does it look like in the current state. Next, I want to go with you to the next steps. What do we still need to do for the ontology in order to be implemented in practice? Who's going to use it, etc. And lastly, I want to start a discussion with you on where do we need to focus. I've got some questions which I hope we can have a nice discussion. So first things first, I hope this video will start and we'll also have some sound. Just a little bit about the project. We don't have sound, but there are subtitles, so I hope you should get it to watch.
Individual, the focus on the context, and the aiming goal. Its study requires input from a diversity of different scientific disciplines, each with its own research traditions, from lab scale to nationally representative distributed sets. Today, the field operates without sufficient levels of harmonization in measures, technologies, and research protocols, hampering adequate integration, transnational and virtual access to research infrastructure, and optimal reusage of installations, data, and insights obtained. This is withholding the food consumer science field from being a harmonized, data-rich science. This way, it can lead the European healthy food choice, public policy, and private strategies to a higher level. Imagine today, Brian wants to understand more about consumer acceptance of healthy products on supermarket shelves. When starting the research, you'll come across a variety of articles with different research protocols, unrelated to each other. You'll have to do some work from scratch. Conclusions are drawn up, the article is published, and the data is stored locally and available only upon explicit request. Are these results generalizable to other countries? No. To other types of consumers? No. To other stores? No. COMFOCUS.
Okay. All technicalities solved. Hopefully, I will also be people can hear me clearly online. So a little bit of introduction about the project. Because people who do animations can do way better than me by just a few PowerPoint slides. So now I want to go into you. So what technological steps do we actually use in order to achieve this harmonization in food consumer science? So what we do, if you look at this slide, at the top level, that's what we call we make harmonized measures, which is defined by a scientific community of experts, of people who actually think about how are we going to measure something. So what do we actually need, for example, to measure something like age? What do we need to measure something like gender? What do we need to measure something like the willingness to pay for a certain food item? So what I do, they discuss how are we going to ask this, what kind of questions are related, etc. So most of the time when we do food consumer science, it is about surveys. sending out questions. When we mean harmonized measures, it is basically a set of questions with predefined answer options, which we are going to send to the survey participants. Now let's imagine we have a social researcher who wants to do some research on a certain topic. So what they do on the COMFOCUS project, they register their study on the platform we made. It's basically a glorified survey tool, so to say. They create a questionnaire, so they've got this whole database, more like a catalog of available questions, which are all harmonized and agreed on by the scientific community. So they select a question on age, they select a question on gender, they select a question on the willingness to pay for a certain food item, etc. They select all these questions, and based on that, you can automatically generate a survey. Next thing, survey is sent out, can be via your own survey platform. Most of the time, Qualtrics is used as a tool. Data is being collected by the researcher, and after that, when the data is there, you can again put the data into our platform. It gets validated, it gets validation rules. Are the answer options logical? If there's something incorrect with data, etc. So it gets a structure after that. You can load the study data into our platform where visualizations can be made. It's based on our needs. This is basically the stream where we try to harmonize consumer science so that results can be used throughout over the world and that we harmonize the way data is collected. This is a little example of the survey tool. So what you see here on the left is, for example, a survey. I think in orange is the survey. It is researcher selected some elements, some harmonized measures that he or she wanted to use to generate a survey. So select an element age, one education level, one net monthly income. So this way you can collect the data. This way you can always, the tool, you can also organize the order of the questions, make some sort of logical route through the questions, etc. So, why do we need an ontology here? The question, but we want an ontology to serve the interoperability and the reuse of the data, assessing the optimization of data, linkage, and management. We want to harmonize the data models used in food consumer science and adhere to fair principles. So, for example, when some sort of study is performed in Germany by a researcher one, and some sort of study is performed in Italy by researcher two, we want to make sure that the data that's being collected is comparable, so that we can make knowledge out of that, and we can compare countries to each other, or we can compare certain types of consumers to each other. So therefore, it's very important to have interoperability there, which we try to achieve by the means of ontology, and therefore facilitate an integrated approach to food consumer research. So, just very briefly about the structure of the ontology. We use BFO as an upper level ontology, use Protégé to develop it. And currently in the ontology, we have already over 100 measures, questions, and their recording classifications imported. And the focus of the current ontology is very much on the questionnaires, how are questionnaires structured, etc. Over here you see the logical framework we use to develop the ontology. So what you see on the left side, you have the person, the rater, somebody who's filling in the survey. He's filling in something about a certain measure. So let's say, for example, the willingness to pay for a certain type of ice cream. So the measure from the willingness to pay. It's about an object, so it's about something. It could be any sort of ice cream, and it also always happens in sort of context. So you could imagine the willingness to pay for a certain type of ice cream on the beach might be higher than the willingness to pay for some ice cream in the supermarket. So how does the ontology now look like? Very briefly, I removed a lot of the relations and the parts here. So, for example, we have the willingness to pay, which is about a single choice question. The willingness to pay is part of the measure, price percentage measure. So that's the harmonized measure, which was developed by a scientific community. And the price percentage measure can have multiple questions in order to answer the question. right present this question is about consumer behavior, and the right measure is the type of harmonized question at the moment. For the sake of time, I will skip this one because we also already go to lunch and we still have a little bit of discussion. So, what are the next steps for us in order to identify the ontology? We need to, and we also discussed today about it, we need to make better use of existing ontologies. We've done quite a lot of work on our own, but we need this linkage, for example, with stuff in the OO foundry. We need to make improvements, both technical, and we need to get a more context. And basically, what we also need to do is make more context with a more theoretical, maybe even philosophical side of the food consumer science. So now the ontology is very much on questionnaires, how a question is structured, what are the questions, etc. But we also need to link, for example, to human behavior ontologies. Next thing we are currently doing is we are building a knowledge graph based on this ontology. But in the projects, we've got tens of researchers actually using the survey platform I showed you, collecting their data that way with the harmonized measures. They are now currently collecting data. We expect to have that data from them during the summer, so we can also use all the data collected, imported, and build a knowledge graph based on the data being collected. The next step is we need to determine the governance model. This COMFOCUS project finishes within a year from now. A lot of work has happened, really useful work as well, and now we need to come together and determine what are we going to do with next, how are we going to make sure it keeps maintained and in its form. So, last slide in the discussion. So, first step, how do we make sure food consumer scientists will use the ontology? It's again about also speaking the same language. We find it quite hard to convince food consumer scientists, for example, to structure their surveys in the way we determine the harmonized measures. They find it quite hard to annotate their data in order to fit the ontology. So we really need to make sure it's actually being reused. How can we link to more theoretical ontologies, for example, about consumer behavior, and how can we get to the governance of the ontology? How can we build an active community around this ontology, and also about the survey tool, etc. All the output of this project in order for it to actually be used and adapted in food consumer science. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I hope we have a nice discussion.
So who wants to start with this discussion?
Or do we all want to go to lunch? That's the question over there.
I have a curiosity, because I have a question you were asking one of the things in general is from discussion is that there are so much about these ontologies to be and in the beginning it will be better than lots of actions, and then we can update them. Especially those that try to reflect very people attitudes on food. I don't see the involvement of these stakeholders now, but it is really for involvement. That's especially one of the things that we'll have to work on, not to for in theory, in the project is actually for improving the number of people, because they don't have this money there. But I don't see the reflection of any of the perspectives of the people. I think that's certainly something to work on. A lot of this is aggregating data from culture, companies, and other people. And then most of the people who are thinking about here might be people that live in this campus, but not for the people who use work. So the thinking ontologies also for them need to find that place. So that's why I think we have to have other projects people to let us maybe they don't maintain because of these specific competence values. Most people don't have that. I don't know if
yeah, I can only totally agree to your comment. Indeed, it's very important to at first we need to identify who are the stakeholders for ontology to benefit in practice, and also translate it to them. Make sure they understand what's happening. Make sure they understand why it's also important for them. And that's indeed a very important task, but also a very hard task to do. I think all of us, I think most of us are more from the technical side of ontologies, so to say. Yeah, it's important work.
What we're doing now, and actually the other thing we work in the last year behind is coming from that side, which translates down to the bank now is with the recipes, but now instead of coming from the banking side, within a part of the project, there is actually and Ontologies, but not yet in the organized way we have here. In conjunction with the data science. It's something where we set the logics that come from different directions and find the meeting point. But it's not easy.
And in the beginning, you asked the question, maybe the rhetorical question, why do we need an ontology? How do you show the value of an ontology? Could you explain us how you did that and how you convince others?
How we did it? If I'm honest over there, how we did it up to now, not good enough. What we are aiming to do is to show the value of the ontology by creating this knowledge graph. And to create this knowledge graph, we first need the data from the researchers who actually use the survey tool, and where we can build a knowledge graph and see the linkages between certain elements popping up in the ontology, and that way maybe also generating new insights for researchers of food consumer science. That way we hope to showcase why an ontology is important to the food consumer scientist, and also by way of visualizing it, making it more tangible.
And how do you involve your stakeholders? Also, this question you ask here, how do you involve them in creating this? Because they might not understand what you're doing until you've actually created it, while you need their input in order to create it. So how do you circumvent this circular?
So within this project,
I can address a bit of that.
Yeah. No, within the project, we at least have every 6 months there's an expert validation session on the ontology, where there are mainly non-technical stakeholders, like people who really work on food consuming science and human behavior, for example. So how does workshops begin? Most often it's like the first 1.5 to 2 hours, just explaining what an ontology is, how is it structured, where does it consist of, why could it be important, and then dive into the subject of a certain element of the ontology in which you want to have some expert validation. Are the relationships, do they make sense? Do we miss any concepts? So that's how we try to do it.
And do you have the feeling that these other experts now also have a better understanding of ontologies and knowledge graphs and what their added value is? And how could you possibly measure that better understanding?
Do I have the feeling? The feeling, yes. I have the feeling they have more understanding than they had 3 years ago at the beginning of the project. For sure, how could you measure that? That's a good question. You could give them a quiz at the end of each workshop and try to do it. You feel it by the way the discussions go. So I think when I was not involved in the beginning of the project, but the discussions were really vague and not really to the point. And now you can really see the food consumer scientists getting the grasp of it and asking the right questions, asking the good questions, and coming with valuable feedback.
I was at the COMFOCUS annual meeting where they did a workshop running through some of those models that we touched on, and the behavioral psychologists weren't quite sure what was going on until we started diving into the behavior change intervention ontology, which is COMFOCUS to draw some concepts on, and that's where you're intervening some kind of, say, stop smoking method to see how well it works, and you're trying to represent now what the effects of that are on. So they were diving in for the first time to the behavior change intervention ontology and seeing all of its methods and particular models of touching on human cognition and starting to see how that could apply to their own specific domain. So maybe it's hard to show how COMFOCUS as a whole can use ontologies and how great it'll be because everything has to work after 3 years. But actually doing little workshops on more targeted ontologies, modeling towards specific experts who are focused on that is exciting.
Any other remarks, questions? If not, thank you, Joep. Thank you for the other presenters. And I think then it's time for us to go to lunch, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.